Hello, everybody, and welcome to another SIG Windows meetup. Thank you all for attending. We don't have a lot of updates today, so I'll just circle through a few of them, and then we'll go around and provide status. So first, Jason, we had a couple of people review your PR. It looks like Aline, who's on the call as well, he can give us a little bit more detailed feedback, and I think Bob also reviewed it. So overall, I think the feedback was positive. So when we get to you, we'll have them also update the status. From Aprenda, we also went ahead and added a couple more developers to the project so they can help with the road towards GA. A lot of the responsibilities initially will include getting ramped up, making sure our docs are up to date, but also start fixing a lot of the bugs that we're finding out of the effort that Adelina and Microsoft are basically running. Those are the details that I have. Patrick, why don't we start with you, and do you have an update on the group managed service accounts PR?
Yeah, I've got I don't have it. I forgot to put that in the notes here. Yeah, so I did talk to SIG Auth with that on Friday. It was a very good conversation, and they had some great suggestions that were helping me move that design forward. Probably the biggest outcome that came out of that was that they had some suggestions around moving the data that's needed into a config map rather than the secrets, because that's going to be much lower overhead to deal with. Since we're not actually storing any passwords in there, that seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But I need to think more about another area and go back to them in a few weeks. Because the main
question is the overhead a Kubernetes overhead for config maps versus secret, or an operational runtime overhead? I'm assuming the latter. Just confirming.
It's some of both. So they've had problems scaling a very large number of secrets because I don't know if it's because of the encryption or if they're storing them in a different way, or I didn't dig into the details, but I know that was an issue they were looking at. And they said that config map didn't suffer from the same limitations. And so there's not any reason that this needs to be a secret, because like all the data is just like account names. It's not, there's no password, there's no certificate in there. All that's handled separately, by Windows using secured connections with Kerberos from between the nodes and the Active Directory controller.
Yeah. So from a Windows, I completely agree with you. Yes. So config maps will work great for that, just because of the fact that we're giving them an account name, nothing else. So that makes sense.
Yeah. But the other part of the use case that I hadn't really thought through that they had a lot of feedback on was how we control access to being able to use this feature. So let's imagine that you wanted to say that users that can deploy into a certain namespace can only use certain group managed service accounts. They think that we could probably achieve that sort of limitation, so that way someone with access to one Kubernetes namespace can't use an unauthorized Windows account. If we either tie it to a Kubernetes service account, which can be restricted on a per name space basis, or using a pod security policy. And so I think that's a pretty good thing to follow up on. So I need to dig more into those topics and see how they work, and see if there's some way that I can sort of gate access to these accounts behind there, because I think that would be a great goal.
Well, I guess that's actually a great point. We had to deal about something similar in Aprenda. But because group managed service accounts, I mean, what's going to prevent someone from setting up their own Kubernetes cluster with their own namespace, typing a few names in there, and then immediately start having workloads that run as group managed service accounts that are authorized? I mean, the only thing that can prevent that is someone going in Active Directory and saying only these target servers can use these managed services.
Yeah. And that is the best practice today, because group managed service accounts are typically gated. Your ACL typically has a list of machine accounts that are allowed to use it,
or an OU. Yeah.
But it doesn't like any admin on that server could use that account.
Yeah.
And so this would let us basically fence these off better. So that way someone that's not an admin on that server can't create a container using that Windows account. So
we should probably add it to do item as part of that PR to also update the security hardening guidelines for Kubernetes to specifically include that item.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on your end, Patrick?
No, I think that was it. And if we've got time later, I can do a short demo of the Hyper-V isolation, but I want to get through the other agenda items first. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jason, you want to give us a quick update on the PR and then some of the feedback that you've gotten?
Yeah, so we've been having multiple discussions internally with that PR, also with the Azure team and the community in general. We wanted to put that out there just because obviously a lot of people are using the WinCNI plugin right now. However, what I want to point out is that longer term, we're going to have those CNI plugins published both for L2 bridge mode and overlay mode on the container networking plugins repo. So this is the official CNI repo, basically. That CNI plugin we initially developed, the WinCNI that we published the source for, was internally being used by Azure, and then we found out recently that it has diverged quite significantly. The people that were using the WinCNI plugin or trying to deploy Kubernetes rather in Azure using ACS engine weren't using the same WinCNI plugin that we have published out there with all of our DNS fixes and what have you. And so we're actively working with the Azure ACS team and the Azure networking team to make sure that their CNI plugin is updated with our fixes. All that said, that again, we're wanting to standardize or rather consolidate the development of those CNI plugins on the container networking official repo. And so I'm a little, that's why we were so hesitant to publish the source code, just because longer term, we already have the WinL2 bridge and WinOverlay CNI plugins that are in PR review. And our development team is looking to finish those up, adding some CNI tests for them in the first week of May. So I'll definitely respond to the comments that we've received in the PR, and I can do that now even. But longer term, I imagine that WinCNI will kind of become defunct, and we'll move over to the container networking plugins repo.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm just trying to think right now. So, like, you know, obviously Aline and I think Bob reviewed this work. Is it worthwhile for them to, you know, how much of a thorough review or like an effort should they bring if in long term we know we're gonna go to the CNI route?
Yeah, definitely. We want to make sure that all the investments that we've made in WinCNI and also in the comments that excuse me, that people have shared are incorporated back into that development. So I fully intend to respond to everybody, including, you know, adding a guide and a README, and having some other details about, you know, someone responded saying, does this solve the build problem where we can't ping outside the cluster from inside the pod? A lot of these are separate from CNI and more generic kind of Windows networking questions, I would say. So yeah, we will definitely be publishing those and looking for updates. I also have on my plate kind of more of a generic description of the host networking service and how it's used, as well as publishing the HNS APIs to detail, in specific detail, how you create networks, endpoints, and policies. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right. Adelina, you want to give us an update on your end, please? Adelina is muted. I'm not sure if she's... Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear
me? Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So basically, I finished.
Hey, Adelina, we lost you there for a second. I don't know if you went back to muted.
Now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good, awesome. I'm using the Slack apps and the Meetup app, and doesn't work apparently. Anyway, so we got through the tests. We have 210, I think now passing. So basically, we are a little bit blocked by the ones that use metrics to determine the number of pods to be created or determine auto scaling and stuff like that. So you may remember last week we talked about this. So those are tests that are being blocked. Now, at the moment, we're going to go through the failures we still have and see if they are fixable on our end, meaning we need an image or it's a trivial fix, like in the test itself, and share the rest of them with SIG Windows and see if and how Kubelet can, if there are a problem in Kubelet and how we can fix them in SIG Windows. But we basically intend on going ahead with the tests we have working, and then just add them one by one once we have them. We have bugs fixed, so we don't block the whole effort on basically bugs.
Makes sense. Hey, Patrick, did you get a chance to look at the intern's work on the statistics and the horizontal pod autoscaler, or?
I don't have anybody assigned to that yet. I emailed the dev managers again today, clarifying that ask.
So if nobody picks it up, can you just send me a quick message? Alex Kochnev, that's on the call, has a couple of developers. Maybe we can put one of them. That would be a good ramp-up thing for them to make sure that A, we can get the right pod and node level statistics, and B, the horizontal pod autoscaler can scale out Windows containers based on load. So Alex and his team can at least tackle that as an early start on their work.
Okay, yeah. I'll talk to you on Slack once I get a response, probably later today or tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. All right, Aline, do you have an update on us?
Yeah, I still need some reviews for the PR in Kubernetes, which enables CNI support for Windows Server 2016, the table build. And regarding the WinCNI, thank you, Jason, for publishing the source code. There are some issues in Kubernetes because it calls a lot of times the CNI when it shouldn't, and I might have a look at that and change it. So you should call the CNI plugin only when necessary. And thank you also, Bob, for the help on OVN Kubernetes.
Thank you, Aline. Bob, you want to give us your update? And one of the other things that Bob is also spending some time now is ramping up a couple of more developers from Apprend that I mentioned earlier. So he's and the team is all going to help on addressing bugs, like I mentioned earlier. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, that's been a lot of this week and last week is ramping up some of the other devs. I did also have that PR that merged in for OVN Kubernetes to fix an issue there. Alan just posted that PR that we're waiting on, which is the RTM support and Kubernetes. It's just waiting on another review or an approval. So.
Can you please talk to somebody, Michael, if you can, just to get this PR in?
So do we need someone from SIG Network, I'm assuming, right?
I think from SIG Windows, actually.
That's the 61940 PR? No, that's not it.
61940, yes.
Yeah.
61940. All right, let me see here who we need to. It's not assigned to us right now, so it went to Don Chen. Let me talk to Don. I'll talk to Don and get back to you.
Thanks a lot. Feel free to ping us via Slack to.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bob, is that it from you?
Yep, that's better.
All right. I don't have anything else here today. I know that we're going to do the demo on the Huawei cloud next week. Patrick, we have a few minutes. I don't know if you wanted to do that demo or...
Yeah, I can go ahead and give it a try. We'll see if it works. So let me share this real quick. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to zoom in on the screen sharing because I've got a couple different windows open here. Are you able to see this okay?
Yeah, it's coming out okay.
Yep.
Okay, excellent.
A little bit small, the letters in the windows, but it's we can see it.
Yeah. The problem is I've got a 4K monitor, so if it's shrinking it down, maybe I can get this bigger. Let me give it a quick try. Okay, we'll see how this looks. Okay.
It looks okay. Probably if you need for the other shows as well, I don't know.
Okay, so what I've been experimenting with here is that over the last couple of months, we've had a series of patches in Windows that were needed in order to enable Hyper-V pod support. And the April cumulative update basically should have the last of those changes that are needed to be able to run one container per pod on the Windows Server version 1709. And so on the node, the only change that's really needed other than installing that patch is basically adding an extra feature gate enablement here, because this is currently an experimental feature. So the kubelet command line just needed that to be enabled there. And because it's an experimental feature, so there we go. VR. I'll go for this 1709. It's enabled. This is enabled through an annotation here, within the deployment. So let me go ahead and give this a quick check. So right now I have two nodes running here. These are both Windows nodes, and of course I've got the Linux master. This is something I deployed through ACS Engine, but then I went and made a few updates to the machine because this isn't all fully orchestrated yet for the setup steps. So I've got two different deployments that I'm going to do. One is on 1709 and one's 2016. So I'll go ahead and I'll show the quick changes between these two files. So in this one, this is the 2016 version. I'm deploying an image where if you were to go pull that down and look at the base layers, it's actually based off of Windows Server 2016. If I tried to run this one without Hyper-V isolation, it's going to fail to start with an error, saying that there's an OS version mismatch. And then, of course, this one I've got using 1709. That one would succeed without this annotation because my host is also running 1709. But if this works the way it's supposed to, when you go and actually look at the containers on the host, you can see that they're Hyper-V isolated. So I should end up with both versions running side by side. So I'll do kubectl get pod. Oh, hey, that started really quick. Last night it took longer. I guess I had to pull the images. Okay, those are running on different nodes, but that's okay. So the first thing I want to do is actually show how one of the ways you can tell if it's running as a Hyper-V container or not. So this node is 9001.
Can you zoom in this window? This is a little small.
Yeah, let me go ahead. Is that a bit better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay. All right. So over here, if I use Docker PS, I can see the containers running as usual. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and do an inspect on this particular container. And if I go up here near the top, we can see that the isolation is actually listed as Hyper-V. So that did work as intended there. So it's running with Hyper-V isolation. And then likewise, the other node, let's see if I have a connection to it. I know this one's tiny, but I just wanted to check and make sure that that was actually a node it was running on. Okay, so that one's working as well. And so now let's see if I can get lucky and contact this on the cluster IP. Because I've got the wrong, I don't have the latest updates to CNI running on this machine. I've been having some problems with service VIPs, but we'll give this a try and see if it works. Okay, so that one's running, that's the 1709 container, and it's running with networking. And this one I think is probably going to fail. I'm still having some issues getting 2016 containers working the way they need to. And I think we may need to actually patch the 2016 base image as well to work with service IPs, but that's something that I'll have to go over with Jason and Dinesh in more detail. So it's weird because I had this working once and then it's not working on the 2016 today. But the key thing is that this is kind of we're not at the point where we've got an experiment where we can actually start being able to test the side-by-side Windows versions that are there, and that's going to be really important as we get to RTM, because we don't want people to have to update their containers at the same time they update their nodes. So this will let us run the mixed versions. And then of course it'll provide that extra isolation. So anyway, so that's that. I've got a gist with the instructions and the notes from the day if you want to give it a try. So.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Patrick. There's also a question from Joe if that's going to work with Linux nodes on Windows. So on the Kubernetes front, you cannot run a Linux container on a Windows node today. We just haven't enabled that. But I don't know about Linux, Linux specifically as it relates to running Linux containers on Windows. So, Patrick, you know that?
Yeah. So the Windows runtime can run Linux based OCI compliant containers. But we're going to have a little bit more difficulty getting that enabled in Kubernetes at first. And that's because the scheduler and the kubelet assume that each node can only run a single operating system. And so I think one of the difficulties there is that we need to basically get that understanding of the kubelet and the scheduler either changed to support multiple OSs, or we need to run two kubelets. From a Moby and Containerd standpoint, we could run two daemons on Windows. One is configured to manage Linux containers, and one is configured to run Windows, and those will work side by side. I've done that for development purposes, but I haven't tried running two kubelets side by side, talking to different Moby engines. Maybe it may be feasible, but I think there's going to be some really interesting problems, particularly with like resources, because what would happen is, let's say I schedule a pod and say give it a gig of memory for a Windows container. Well, now all of a sudden the free memory is going to change for the Linux node that's running on the same hardware.
And not only that, on the networking side, and probably Jason can tell us, there's going to be a slew of problems trying to run Linux containers on Windows, just because a lot of the networking necessary infrastructure pieces are not going to be there, right?
I don't think that's necessarily, I mean, so you won't be able to put Windows and Linux containers in the same pod, but you'll still be able to deploy both of them on the same node. Because we're still setting up the resolve.conf and everything in, within the container, or sorry, within the, VM that's wrapping that container Linux.
Who handled the routing in that case? So
the Windows node would still handle it.
So kubeproxy on the Windows node?
Yeah.
And it will handle the routing for both Linux and Windows containers. I don't think it's something we'll probably invest to anytime soon. But yeah, that's interesting that it could be a possibility in the future.
Yeah. And the other thing we're looking at is the Kata stuff, because it may be possible to consolidate some of what we've done to support Linux containers on Windows with some of the Kata work. So that's something that's under investigation. But I guess to sum it up, we need to get the Windows support done first, and then sort of think about what the use cases are that we want to enable for Linux containers on the same node, and then work towards those. So if anyone has use cases or feedback on that, I'd love to hear it. So. And to answer Joe's question, yes, this needs 1.10. And I don't have ACS Engine updated to do this automatically, but it's probably feasible because ACS Engine creates the scripts used to start the kubelet. So it'd probably be just a couple line change to be able to enable that in their templates.
Cool. All right. Thank you all, and we'll right at time. Thank you all for attending. We'll talk. There's a couple of agenda items that got added in the next few weeks, so we'll address those later, including some of the work around the iSCSI and SMB Windows plugins and the Huawei demo. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.